Good morning, Monday morning here. I owe my guest a sincere apology. I know he probably doesn't want to hear it again, but I've already apologized to him. I double booked two guests today, and just my head spinning, and I apologize. So to my guest, Jerry Fu. Jerry started a company 3 months ago called Adapting Leaders. We're going to focus today's conversation around the concept of conflict aversion. So Jerry's a leadership coach. He's actually a recovering pharmacist who started a company focused on leadership coaching. So I'm really interested to get his take on this whole concept of conflict management, conflict aversion. We're going to dive deep into that. And again, and I apologize to him before we dialed in, but I double booked two guests this morning, and I have to acknowledge that I made a mistake. So Jerry, thanks for being patient with me, and I look forward to this conversation.
Well, hey, Dave, thanks for having me. And as you know, right, in conflict resolution, we are happy to show grace and receive grace. So I'm just so happy that we connected and that we're able to move forward with the conversation. So yeah, let's get started. So I'll be happy to jump in and say that I am actually a conflict averse person. And it took a long time for me to embrace the process of figuring out systems or a routine that would help me overcome my inherent conflict aversion. Growing up, right, one time, summer between college years, a friend of mine, a college friend, was like, "Hey, I'm road tripping around your area. Do you want to hang out for a couple of days?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." I run it by my mom because I'm home for the summer, and she's like, "Yeah, yeah, invite Gary over. We'll call him Gary." And so Gary comes over. We have a couple of days. My mom's a gracious host, and we thought everything was fine until he left. And then my mom's like, "Can you believe this guy? Like, he didn't make the bed, after he was done. He left hair in the shower. He didn't pick up after himself. He seems like a nice guy, but I wouldn't invite him over again." Right. And this is the model that, I followed, right? Because it was like, hey, let the other person save face, which is, common for honor shame cultures. So I'm not like trying to single my mom out or anything, but this is the norm, right? It's like, hey, don't make a scene for your guest. You're supposed to be a good guest. But instead of trying to establish expectations from the beginning, it's like you just hope that they pass the secret test that you have for them and hope they don't hit any tripwires. And if they do, well, they failed, and just quietly push them out the door, right? Combine this with the fact that in my first 5 years of my pharmacy career, I'm working for a chain pharmacy that has a very unfortunate approach to customer service, which is to placate the customer or placate the patient, even if what they're asking for is unreasonable or possibly illegal, right? And what happens if you try to stand your ground anyway, right? They go call your supervisor, they complain louder, and the supervisor will make this go away, just, give them a gift card or something, right? And you just go home wondering when you'll have a spine, right? And so these are the kind of things that I'm dealing with, right? And so I say this because I leveraged my connections to get out of that chain job to a teaching job through a pharmacy consulting company that I moved from Tennessee to Houston for, which is where I currently reside. And initially I thought, oh, this is the solution. I love this company. I'm excited to work for them. And the problem is that I did not appreciate what it meant to be a successful entrepreneur or to get the job done, right? Because I was still in this victim mentality where, I just was, annoyed by all the injustices I dealt with all these conflict resolution situations with, unreasonable patients, things like that, right? And so now I'm in a situation where I'm being held accountable for the job that they hired me to do. And I thought, with my chain job, I was like, as long as I did a better job than 70% of my workforce, my boss could get mad at me, but she knows, oh, well, Jerry is still better than 70%. So we can't get too mad at him. But now, right, I'm at the company, my boss is like, hey, no, like stories as to why you didn't get the job done are not acceptable. We are paying you to get a job done. And so after 11 months of that, I got fired. And so, it was my fault, right? I wasn't that serious about being an instructor, getting the job done. And now the tables are turning because the next job I find after getting fired, my paychecks are bouncing and I'm filling for crooked doctors. And now, right, my conflict aversion, now I'm the one that has to initiate this difficult conversation. I don't know how to do that, right? So it was two ways, right? Conflict aversion number one is when people are upset with me, and I just like, I don't like the fact that people are upset with me. Let me just placate them because, I'm a popular guy. I'm a likable guy, right? I don't want to lose that identity in this moment, right? As opposed to trading that popularity for respect. and trusting that, hey, all right, on one hand, I want to be coachable, I want to be curious, right? And lean into this and say, why is this happening? What led to this? What is actually my responsibility, and what is things that are unfair, right? And sort that out. And then the other is, okay, I'm upset with somebody. How do I, initiate this conversation in a way that is healthy and productive, and that even if it is uncomfortable, that we can find a resolution that leaves both sides okay and not resentful. So the 5-step framework that I've been giving away on my website, right? I have a free guide you can download on this. So step 1, imagine what success sounds like, right? So at one point I had to evict a roommate. Like, okay, well, he's not going to pay out to restore the lease. So realistically, success would be, I have to ask you to leave before I call the cops by this certain day. Step 2, find 10 seconds of courage so that I don't default to comfort. I don't start rationalizing. Well, he's had a rough time. Maybe I just give him another week to hopefully come around. A lot of people love this step because 10 seconds, you do enough to set the boulder in motion. You lock the gate behind you, and now you're like, crap, I got to sink or swim, right? I got to move forward with this. So a lot of people like that. Step 3, you got to script your critical moves. Don't just put it in my head. Let me put it on paper, right? Let me organize my thoughts. And then step 4, let me rehearse these steps, right? Don't just, put it on paper. Hey, let me role play with a friend, right? Let me practice in front of a mirror. How's my tone? How's my body language, right? Train in the dojo before you fight on the street. It's like, all right, now I can feel more prepared, right? And then step 5, hey, follow through. The cost of inaction, that's really the catalyst I'm getting to. You realize the cost of inaction is worse than the cost of trying and failing. These are some things that I use so that I don't default to the conflict aversion I grew up my entire life.
What did it feel like to never say anything?
Oh God, it felt terrible. Like you just have this, the resentment it's like, the sediment just builds up, right? And then it gets to like a breaking point. You're just like, I don't know what to do with all this, right?
Right.
And I'm the only one living with it, right? The classic quote, resentment is drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die, right? You're just like, they're not even thinking about these past injustices. I'm the one that's living with them, right?
Yep.
And it took a while, right? And, probably, some therapy and counseling to just realize, hey, you know what? I don't know how to deal with this, right? Let me at least talk to somebody else and get to the root of it. And much like conflict resolution, right? Forgiveness is also a skill you can practice and improve at. And that was something, I struggled to appreciate for a long time, right? Like leadership, I used to think, wow, they have it, I don't know if I'll ever have it, right? Same thing with conflict resolution. I'm just like, they have it, I don't. I tried a couple times, I failed at it. I'll just never be good at it. So to recognize, hey, well, I had a hand in things. I can't afford to beat myself up. That's also not healthy, right? Because people say, well, you could have said no, you could have done all this, and you're just like, oh God, like I feel so incompetent and pathetic. And then it's like, okay, no, like give yourself some grace, right? Be kind to yourself. Hey, what would you do differently now?
Yeah, so I would say I come from the exact opposite place as you, where I would get myself in trouble for speaking up. And so I would hold the same resentment toward the quiet person. I would look at the quiet person and say, you have no courage. You don't you're allowing a problem to linger, or that passive aggressive approach is dishonest. Is what I would be thinking. Why not just let somebody punch you in the face and deal with the punch instead of silently. And I'm going back, like I'm trying to put myself back as a younger person, and I just poke at that. And so that, which is just as toxic, I would think, as carrying the resentment. It's resenting those that don't speak up. But it's interesting because as a coach, the thing I probably deal with the most is people that don't say what they want to say. They don't speak up, they stay silent. And I would say that it probably does more damage than those that speak up. I would say the silence is what erodes a culture in an organization or a family more so than speaking up. The silence almost triggers the mind it poisons the mind in a lot of ways.
I can appreciate what you're saying, right? Because like I'll say this much: it is on one hand, silent resentment definitely doesn't help you anywhere, right? That passivity never helps you in this case, right? And then the opposite side, where things are so open, where you're throwing barbs and you don't know how to fight clean, like
Right.
also, can also is better, but not by much, right? And
Right.
so, yeah, but I've learned placating, right? And I've learned this in my current relationship. Placating because you think that's what the other person wants, even when you're like unhappy about it. Like how do you think that makes them feel? They're just like, you mean you just told me this answer because you thought that would be enough, but you're sitting there still secretly mad at me? It's
Right.
like, no, like,
Right.
and being single for a long time, Dave, like it's easy for me just to, I fell back into the habits that I told myself I wouldn't fall into, right? As soon as someone would like, hurt me or disappoint me, and it's just kind of like, okay, right. On one hand, I can still be pleasant with them, and I'm secretly going to move them to an outer ring of my circles and create distance, right?
Right.
But that doesn't work in an intimate personal relationship, right? With certain family relationships or your marriage, right? Just distancing yourself from the other person because you don't like them.
Right.
That's it's a lot of unlearning I have to do.
Yeah, well, the other thing I was thinking about your customer service story, not
Mhm.
necessarily a personal one, but having
Yeah.
worked in retail before,
Yeah.
I was probably the worst employee. When I think back to my experiences, even,
Mhm.
16 years old working in a retail environment, if a customer
Mhm.
came in and was rude to me,
Mhm.
they were getting it right back. And I never really thought of the consequences. I had a guy threaten to beat me up in the store one day. He was probably my
Mhm.
age. I was probably 18.
Mhm.
And I remember just putting my stuff down. I said, let's do it. And I was totally fine with it. And
Yeah.
because I wasn't going to hide from um, the tension or the conflict. Now, totally inappropriate way
Mhm.
of dealing with things, but it was tough. Dealing with the public is not easy. And here you
Mhm.
spent a lot of time. One, I think being a pharmacist, or say being in finance or being in engineering or whatever,
Yeah.
those are probably jobs that typically attract a quieter, lower key person, for example,
Mhm.
than
Yeah.
an outward, vocal person. And now all of a sudden you're dealing with the public. So were you just biting your lip the whole time?
Like there's a right and a wrong way, right, when you're trying to be restrained. And so I'll give two examples just to kind of illustrate. On one hand, it like, I think how you want to handle a conflict, I think, depends on how much ownership or skin in the game you have, right? And like one of the favorite examples I heard during pharmacy school, it's one thing to work for a chain when you're representing someone else's brand. It's another if you're in an independent pharmacy where it is your name on the line, it is your reputation, it's your liability, right? And so one of my favorite stories, and this is, I guess, the one that I always want to take courage from, right? At one point, a friend of mine who owned his own pharmacy, someone came with a fraudulent script for like some pain medication, and the guy looks at it, it's like immediately knows this is a fake. And so he's like, you know what? He tells the patient, you know what? I'm gonna have to call the doctor right now to verify this prescription, make sure it's legitimate. And in full view of the patient, he calls the doctor, manages to get him on the phone, and says, "Hey, just wanted to verify the script for John Smith." He's like, "You didn't write it? Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification." Click. Goes up to the guy, rips up the prescription in front of his face. "Don't ever come in here again." You can't do that. And so, and this is what I'm getting to now, right? That there is a way you can engage where you can put the gloves on and at the same time, like, do it in such a way that still shows that you have dignity and respect for the other person, even if you disagree with them, right?
Mhm.
Especially if it's someone you care about. You're just like, okay, yeah, I don't want to just wound this person with like really like witty sarcasm. Let me make sure they understand, hey, like I say things like this, like to my teammates, I'll say something like, "Hey, I wouldn't share this feedback with you unless I felt like you could handle it." So there is reassurance in the middle of the tough moment to say, "Hey, remember, I'm fighting for this relationship. I'm fighting for us, and I want to bring out the best in you. And that's going to involve sometimes some really difficult things. And that is okay, because I'm going to trust that you're going to be able to recover from this, that you're going to receive this and the heart behind it. And that, yes, at the end of the day, we'll be able to resume, being okay around each other again."
Yeah, I
So,
would say what
yeah.
you just said is a practical strategy to actually engage with somebody and still have a firm foundation in the conversation. I
Mhm.
noticed you referenced 5 steps before. I've talked to a lot of people who have steps. As a matter of fact, I have I do a lot of teaching and training as well. And when
Awesome.
I talk to HR people, they want to know, well, what are the steps and what are the
Mhm.
methodologies? And
Mhm.
I've got them, but the reality is those are just simply foundational points.
Yeah.
The reality is you got to go live that. And
Mhm.
so the
Yeah.
5 steps are the 5 steps, but when people don't have the resilience or experience to engage in what they perceive to be conflict, they're defeated before they get into the conversation often. And those that actually have the courage to actually enter into the conversation often struggle the minute they get the pushback. The minute somebody comes back and isn't willing to play the game or isn't willing to take them seriously, how do you help people develop that, the courage to hang in there? You can have the 10 seconds of courage, but until you have Mike Tyson coming back at you, that courage can fade pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point, right? Because when you're navigating uncharted territory and you have no frame of reference as to what success can actually look like because you've never experienced it for yourself, what do you do for someone like that, right? What I tell people often, right, and these are more principles than anything else, like if you're struggling to find courage, use curiosity instead, because now you're just being a humble learner about the situation. Say, hey, wow, that you sound really upset. Tell me more about that, right? Help me learn your side of things, right? And to reference the second example I was going to give, right? So I've had customers call me, at a previous job, and they'll say, I was supposed to get my prescription yesterday, it didn't happen. And when I got curious, right, and I would say something like, wow, yeah, tell me about what happened, because and I would agree with them, right? Just like, yeah, you have every reason to be upset, right? I would be upset too. And then they realize I can't get mad at this guy because he's on my side. He wants to find a solution for me. He wants to take care of me. And so I'll start to negotiate a little bit and say, hey, can you give me, half an hour or an hour to go do some digging and find out exactly what happened? And they'll say, well, I need this now. I'm just like, look, like and that's when you realize it's okay to say no, to say, hey, realistically, I'll be happy to call the doctor's office in the next 5 minutes to track this down, or FedEx, see where your package went. And, I understand it's urgent. And realistically, like, this is the soonest I can get back to you in order to make all the calls and do all the research. Can you give me that much? Right. And because they know I'm asking for time, not because I'm stalling and I'm scared. It's because I'm just letting them know, hey, you want me to get to the bottom of this? This is what I'm going to need from you. And so when you are able to do that, yeah, hey, just get curious, right? And we, let's give them some scripted phrases. There's a great coach out there, has a website called Say It Skillfully for things like this. I'll plug her website too, because, she has videos of, situations, and she gives you like some talking points to say, okay, hey, try this phrase out, try that phrase out. And so now, right now, people realize, hey, I don't have to learn success on my own. I can learn it from other people. And okay, now I have an idea what to say, right? Like, one of my favorite phrases I heard from another manager friend that I wouldn't have never known, and I wouldn't have ever known unless I heard it from him. Whenever someone, like an employee, tries to drag in the friendship, right? They're just like, hey, Mike, I thought we were friends. And he's like, don't drag our friendship into this. And I'm like, oh, I'm totally keeping that for myself. So, anyway.
Or does it have to be mutually exclusive? So no, we are friends, and we're still going to we're still going to be honest with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's interesting. As you think about your background, you do a lot of work with the Asian American community, and you allude to this in some of the other interviews that I've seen you do, and I know in some of your write-ups, it's almost like you're trying to help folks that were conditioned to approach conflict in this manner, or conditioned to not make a big deal out of these things. How much of what you do is in response to that?
Oh, everything's in response to that, basically, because, right, the ideal client, right, this is what I went through about 10, 12 years ago, where, you grow up listening to your parents and you say, well, they've got about 20 or 30 years worth of experience on me, they probably know a lot, and they do, right? And so let me just trust that what they're telling me is true, trust that I can take what they say, most of what they say, at face value, right? And, that will work up to a point, right? Definitely. So there are some principles that carry over, like, hey, work hard, delayed gratification, those are good things to keep in mind. Yeah. But actually, no, let me not say but, let me say and, because I try not to use but. And when you start to see that some of those beliefs don't work consistently in other settings, like, you might work for a company that doesn't downplay difficult things, right? They don't just give you a promotion just because they see that you're working hard, then they're not looking for this, right? And you realize, hey, I have to be more of an advocate for myself. I can't just keep my head down and work hard and hope people will promote me. Hey, I need to find a way to show the company how much value I'm adding without showing off, right?
Hmm.
I thought this career of medicine that my parents insisted I pursue in order to get a high quality of life and get prestige for a family reputation would be enough. I thought marrying, this really smart spouse from this really, credible school and then having kids, like I thought I did everything correctly and I got everything. Like I know friends that do this and then they realize they're just like, well, I thought I could finally, put my life in cruise control. And it's like, no, you just graduated from med school. Now you have to work another 20 years. Like you just set yourself up for a very challenging career
Right.
and all for the sake of your parents' approval, right?
Yeah.
Not all, but mostly, right? You didn't want medicine because you have a heart for helping people, and you wanted the quality of life, and that's at least just be honest about that, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, yeah,
Well, it's interesting. I used to work with a guy from his family's from Nigeria. Really, really
hmm
good kid, hard worker, did
yeah,
good at his job.
hmm
But in his mind, it wasn't good enough for his parents, who were
hmm
doctors, I believe, both doctors. And his brothers were, I want to say they were attorneys. I forget
hmm
exactly. But he
Jigglers,
was,
yeah,
yeah, but he was not, he was a shameful recruiter. I'm saying that kind of a tongue in cheek here,
fair
but
enough.
he never felt like it was good enough.
hmm
And so he ended up resigning from the job, but he told me he resigned to go back to school. A year later, he asked me if we could meet. Maybe it was a year and a half later. He said,
Yeah.
I lied to you a year and a half ago. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, I did go back to school, but I was working for a competitor and I didn't have the courage to tell you. And it's been eating me ever since.
Oh wow.
And the crazy part is he went back to get a degree, a master's in finance.
Okay.
And to this day, this is probably 13, 14 years ago, maybe more. And he's still a recruiter to this day. So he
Wow.
never pursued it, but it
hmm
was just I felt disappointed for him in a lot of ways, because he was
hmm
only living to please his parents. And
hmm
then the way he exited the company ate at him. And then ultimately, when he pursued what they wanted him to pursue, he still didn't end up following through on it. So all that
mm
wasted time. And
Wow.
I never understood that. I never understood the pleasing the parents piece. And I
hmm
had some friends growing up whose parents were from overseas.
hmm
My parents were from here, and I
hmm
did not have a lot of respect for them. It wasn't the greatest house to grow up in. We weren't
hmm
treated very well sometimes. And
Yeah.
and so I never understood the loyalty when a
hmm
child was blindly loyal to parents just because.
hmm
So but it's interesting because you were probably wrestling with the same things inside. I don't feel good about the blind loyalty, and just like I
hmm
didn't feel good about my frustration. My
hmm
question is that at what point did you see your parents differently?
hmm
Something had to happen where you're like, today's the last day. I see them differently. I'm not good with this anymore. What happened?
Yeah, yeah. There are a couple Genesis moments you could say where you realize that, um, you know, we had the ironic thing is that I think we wanted a lot of the same things for myself, but not on their terms. And I say this because, yeah, in the middle of my pharmacy career, right as it was wrapping up, right, I'm starting to get job offers, and my mom, you know, is insistent on a certain chain pharmacy. People can figure out which one it is. I'm not going to mention it here, but she was insistent that this was the company I need to work for. Like my dad struggled with gainful employment, being an immigrant, and she's like, I don't want you to go through that same adversity that he did. So just work for this company and just bank away money for 20 years. And one day you'll be able to get to do what you finally get to want to do. And, you know, at that point, right, conflict averse, I was mad about some of the things that I had led into my life that I was resentful of, didn't resolve, didn't forgive, didn't, have closure with. And I was just like, okay, fine. And like, not even, she's never worked a day in her life in her pharmacy, but moms know best, right? And so we gotta listen. You don't have to listen to her, but I did, because yeah, trying to be a good son, trying to honor the investment they gave in me, that they supported all my tuition costs, things like that, right? And yeah, just first 6 months of the job, I was like, I hate this. Like I don't like the fact that she felt like I would be happy here and I'm not. And and me being very pessimistic, I was just like, well, that was my best chance to, get a job I wanted, and I threw it away because, I listened to my mom's bad advice, and I beat myself up thinking that that was enough. And so that was the first moment that I was just like, okay, I'm, the woman she had set up to marry me or date me. She was actually a very attractive person, but I wasn't excited about a life with her. And thankfully she moved on after waiting for me for a long time, right? And that was another moment of passivity. But the second moment was just a really bad customer service incident after 5 years with this company. I had a season where it was really nice, where I had flexible scheduling and it was great, but once that went away, I was unhappy again. But yeah, after a really bad customer service incident, where a patient was mad that after her insurance changed, like no one called her to get the updated information, and she's just like, all these claims were run incorrectly, and now like I have to go through extra to fix this. What are you going to do about it? I'm just like, sorry, the solution I offered her was not satisfactory, and she threatened to take all her business away. And then after I got off the phone, my partner gives me the stink eye because she felt like I was handling this poorly, and I'm just like, you only heard my side, you should hear what she was saying, right? Anyway, but yeah, that was the moment I just said, I got to leave. And that's when, I leveraged my connections to say, hey, okay, now I'm going to really, not just say I'm going to find a job that I would actually be excited about, but I'm going to do it. And so, yeah, when I got the, offer to get a part-time teaching job with this consulting company that my parents had never heard of. And my parents are like, why are you walking away from full-time benefits? Why are you walking away from, a steady paycheck? And I just said, because I can't, like, the price I'm paying for the stability that you insist is what's best for me, what's the point, right? I understand, like there are things I need to work toward and will take time and effort to really get the big rewards. But at the same time, I also am going to fight for a quality of life that is, I think is why I even went to this school to begin with, right? And so, that was the time when I realized, the irony is that, we both wanted for me, a stable career, and then also to marry someone who comes from a good family, who's clearly has a good head on their shoulders. But I wanted to find it for myself, and not just because my parents are pushing things toward me, right? I don't, as much as they want to help me, and I'm grateful for their help still, but at some point, like, I'm not going to grow. I'm not going to be able to handle my own adversity if you keep stepping in for me. Right?
Yeah. As you're talking, Jeff, I'm thinking that, you probably, and your parents probably underestimated how critical the people skills are, no matter what you do, whether you're a pharmacist or a finance person or an engineer or whatever, you still have to encounter and deal with people, customers, colleagues, bosses, subordinates. And in the work I do, that's what it comes down to. It doesn't matter. I used to work in a meat department back when I was a kid. And when I first went into that job, I was, a young kid, and I work with older guys that didn't talk like they didn't speak like I spoke. And I walked in there and I felt like I was so naive. It almost felt like I was walking into prison in a lot of ways. And the way they, talked to me and talked to each other, I thought, how am I going to survive in this stupid environment?
Wow.
And then I learned probably within about 3 months, oh, this is just talk. These guys are really, really harmless. But I didn't initially have the resilience to survive in that dynamic. And I wonder, and then as time went on and I got used to the people and I got comfortable there, I learned to love the job. I really learned to love the job. Now, for the first 3 months, I hated the job. I hated the people. I hated the job. But it was really, I didn't know how to survive there. I wonder, though, with you, if you had to start all over again, knowing what you know now, would your experience as a pharmacist been different? You might not love pharmacy work, but would you have handled things different? Would you have felt differently about the work?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I think, I think what would have helped is if the training, the way they trained us to handle customer incidences, right? If they gave us enough confidence to say, hey, we believe that you can find a solution, right? First is say, hey, look, we wouldn't have hired you unless we felt you were confident in building relationships, maintaining relationships well. And here are some best practices, to do so, to say, hey, when a patient is upset about insurance, hey, like, why is my copay so high? A common complaint, right? To say, hey, look, why don't I look into that for you, right? Just do your best to state your case. Hey, look, we don't set those prices. Those are your insurance companies. And so if you want me to take the time out now to get them on the phone to get an explanation, it may take 20, 30 minutes. And it's rush hour. Like, we don't have time to, we don't have time to really give you the attention that you need, right? If we're in this situation, right? And so to be able to tell people this, like, here are some principles, here are some talk tracks that you can use to along these principles, right? Because I sat through some really bad customer service stuff where they're just like, yeah, you can do this and that. And it's like, okay, no, like, don't beat them up when, like, they just give in or cave in. It's like, find out where the confidence is lacking so that they can feel like, yes, I am equipped to handle these customer service incidences more effectively.
You know what I notice when I go to the pharmacy, which is rare, we don't have the greatest insurance. And so there are times where I'll go up to the window after waiting in this long, the long drive through. When I finally get there, the pharmacist at the window 9 out of 10 times will cringe and they'll say, before you pay for this, are you aware of what this costs? I'm wondering if there's a better option. And I always think, I'm never mad at them. And then I feel like they might be, maybe they're being trained to diffuse what they know is going to come back at them, which is shock, having waited in line, and then all of a sudden $120 for, say, these two pills or something.
Yeah.
And is that what needs to go into some of this training, is learning to put themselves in the customer's shoes?
Yeah, I think, just to ask themselves, if you were going to receive this information, like, how would you want them to approach you, right? And I remember one of the funniest things I heard a friend use was like, she's like, oh, I would always compliment the patient on something. Like, she's like, oh, I love your earrings. And they're like, oh, thank you. And they're like, so bad news about your copay. And it's like, that's actually terrible, because like you think you're softening the blow when you're actually setting them up to go take like this really like bad roller coaster dive. And, I think part of it is saying, hey, if this is information you feel, because you have no idea what's going to set off the customer, right? I remember at one point someone got mad about a 90-day supply of their, blood pressure medication going from $5 to $10. Like, they were like, why is it going up? And you're just like, $10 for 3 months is pretty good. And then this was back in, Republican town, and they're just like, can you believe what's going on with Obama in office? And I'm just like, okay, I'm not going to get into that discussion. And it was just funny where, because I dealt with a lot of things, and you just go home feeling like your soul is crushed, and you just kind of like, why am I even bothering with this job when people just beat me up because, they're killing the messenger every single time. And so, part of it though is just, these techs, including myself, are too afraid to pick up the phone to call the insurance company. Hey, like, I'm just trying to find out, is this information still correct? Or call the patient. Hey, whatever we had on file isn't working for you anymore. Has anything changed? Right? Because most people, they're afraid these patients would blow up and be like, no, like, what I had on there is correct. Like, it's your fault. And you're just like, and to give, employees that initial confidence to say, okay, once they push back, here's how you respond, right? Yes. Here are the critical points, kind of like to what I said about step 3, script the critical moves. At some point, if a patient is going to push back and get upset, saying, accuse you of being incompetent, how do you, still overcome that and say something like, hey, I understand you're frustrated. I am just doing the best I can for you to make sure everything's straight. I'm happy to look into it for you. And here's the help that you can give me to make sure I'm giving you the results you want. Learning to get past that initial pushback, like we talked about earlier, it would help a lot of people realize, oh, okay, realistically, like, this is how a patient's going to react, and here's how I can be ready for that reaction.
The two things that are they're resonating with me the most, I think are the most important, is teaching them how to initiate and not hide from what needs to be done. But the second piece for me, and all 5 I'm sure are very important, but the second piece for me is, don't sugarcoat what they're likely to encounter. You've got to let people know what's coming back at them and prepare them for it. It's like, this is going to come back, and will you still stand there? Will you still be present in the conversation? Now, tell me this. So you started adapting leaders 3 months ago, correct?
Well, I started like in October 2020. The 3 months was with New Horizons, which I'm partnering up with. But yeah, so the first year was basically like I did private tutoring to cover my expenses, and then did a lot of podcasts, just planting seeds and networking. And my challenge now, right, is getting over my own fear of rejection and conflict in order to meet more clients, get more referrals, right? And so, I got to live this out, right? Because if I don't, I'm the biggest hypocrite in the world. So yeah.
Well, you're a product. You're a product of what you do, right? So as long as you demonstrate it, people are likely to approach you. So let me ask you this next then. What kind of organizations should be thinking, what should be reaching out to you?
I'm starting to talk to groups like Organization of Chinese Americans. I'm working with ASEN, which helps with leadership development, for Asian professionals as well. And any company really that employs Asians, right? That's also the flip side. So either Asians working in organizations that have culture struggles, talking with them, or owners that employ Asians to say, hey, every time we try to discuss difficult things, they just, they're like, oh, things are fine. And it's like, but then things aren't fine. And every time we try to engage them, they just either placate or shut down or create distance. And so, how do we really build good relationships with them, solid relationships with them, right? So yeah, I'd say start with Asian American organizations that have professionals in their 20s and 30s that recognize, hey, you know what, my parents grew up in another era, and while there are principles that I appreciate, some of them are kind of obsolete now. So
got it.
Yeah.
So ideally, any organization that employs 20 and 30 something Asian employees, basically, would be ideal for you.
Yeah.
And then if they were to engage with you, what is it that they would be buying? Coaching services, training services?
I've been facilitating since 2012 with the pharmacy leadership nonprofit, and so that's my jam. Where basically, like, the best product I can offer them, or service I can offer them, is a workshop built around content, where you're kind of coaching around a couple key principles or a story, right? From books like The Four Conversations, which was like a key book in helping me kind of figure out my own recipe for conflict resolution, right? And so I introduced a little bit of new material, and then we ask questions around it to say, hey guys, what resonates with you, right? Based on what I said, what don't you agree with and why? And now, right, we're starting to unpack maybe some limiting beliefs, or some fixed beliefs around, things that might feel justified but are ultimately ineffective. And then right after we've kind of realized, hey, maybe we can change your thinking about this based on this new information. Okay, what next actions do we want to take to really implement these and apply these well? And so whether I'm doing this for individuals or for organizations, right? Whether it's individual or group sessions, that's what they're getting, right? It is a combination of stories, either personal or ones I've researched, from all the books that I read, and to really just give people an opportunity to reflect on useful information, and then also inspire them to come up with their own solutions and how they want to apply these new concepts.
It's interesting, especially as the world gets smaller and smaller, and all cultures are integrated in a manner in which really they've never been in history. I can speak personal experience. I used to do a load of work with people from India, and early on, I did not understand. I was very ignorant to the cultural differences, depending on where the person was from. But the passive, what you were talking about from a passive perspective, stood out to me. I had a conversation with a guy. He was from India, and he called me wanting a pay increase. And I'll never forget the way he said, Dave, look, I know you probably can't do anything. If there's anything you can do, I'm okay with it. And I said, what if I can't do anything? He said, I'll totally be okay with that too. He said, I just figured I'd ask. I said, okay. I go, because as of now, I don't think I could do anything. And he said, I understand. So I went back, I came back, and I got him an $8,000 raise, thinking this guy's going to love me. I can't believe I just pulled this off.
Yeah.
When I called him back, he was completely offended at the raise, because in his head, he thought I would come back with more, even though he said the opposite. And we had I was angry at him for being angry. And then he was angry at me for not living up to this unspoken number. And those are the things, as the years went on, I had to learn that, just because somebody says or doesn't say something
Mhm.
doesn't mean that's what's going on in their head. And
Mhm.
so I think as you go and you help, say, the Asian American community, the other side, needs help too. Both sides
Yeah.
need to understand. You can't just help one side. I needed help too,
Mhm.
on understanding the cultural nuances. Now that's one nuance. I'm not saying that every person from India won't talk about
Yeah.
money in that way. I have no
Mhm.
idea. But in the
Yeah.
moment, I was angry at him and I thought of
Mhm.
him as dishonest. And
Mhm.
he thought of me as letting him down. So
Wow.
I don't know to what extent you get into the other side, whether it's American or Canadian or European, or do you get into helping the Asian community understand the other side?
Oh, I mean, you have to, right? I mean, because that's how you teach them to engage, right? Is recognizing, hey, this is if you're going to have a conversation, right? You need to empathize with the person you're talking to, right? There's a great book by Edgar Schein called Humble Inquiry that has some really great examples of multicultural, surgical team where you got like a Hispanic and an Asian, and how do you navigate all the potential tripwires of like, hey, don't lose face, don't embarrass them, right? And yeah, to be able to find that middle ground and say, let's say if we replay the conversation, say, and just ask them, hey, look, what kind of number are you looking for, right? You can tell me it's safe, right? Because I'm not going to resent it. I just need to know what you're looking for, right? Because a lot of conflict comes from mismanaged expectations, right?
Yep.
In his mind, he's like, okay, let me just be diplomatic about it, even though this is secretly what I'm really hoping for. And in your mind, you're just kind of like, okay, I'm going to lowball, this is what I realistically can do. And let's hope that if I over deliver, he'll be happy with this. And it turns out, yeah, like there's still conflict because I'm not here to point fingers, right? But to assess, like, I wish he would just say, this is what I'm looking for, right? And to maybe coach him up to say, hey, like, don't just ask for this number, right? Demonstrate why this number is justified, right? So the boss is more likely to have so if you build a case and advocate for yourself, you don't have to just hope your boss throws you some scraps, and that your boss would be happy to throw you scraps because you didn't justify getting this phrase except for, I want this, right?
Right.
And then on your side to say, hey, look, yeah, just ask from the beginning. Okay, what are you looking for, right? Because now that I know what you're looking for, I can be realistic about how much of that I can actually give you. And anything less than that is not meant to be an insult to you, right? It is just the reality of the situation. And to be able to say, hey, you know what, it may not be ideal. He might still be resentful of the fact that the company wasn't willing to pay him what he thought he was worth. But
Right.
hey, you know what? If I've learned anything about conflict, it's going to involve compromise, So that's one other thing to keep in mind. But
Good.
yeah, it's like you said, right? Yeah, both sides. It is one thing to help Asians navigate things. It also is to say, hey, look, yeah, you're understand, like, you need empathy for their side, because until you do, you're not going to be able to frame your requests in such a way that they're actually going to receive them well.
Jeff, is there anything that I haven't asked you or anything you want to say to take us home?
Yeah, I'll end with a story, just to help kind of people just kind of process this. So when I was in high school, at one point, I was playing hacky sack with some classmates after school, and there are teachers that didn't like students doing this, and so if you did it during school, it would get confiscated. But after school, right, it's like, what does it matter? No one's hurting anybody. But these two older white women, two older white teachers, come up to me, like, at one point, as if they were going to confiscate my hacky sack, and I said, I made the case, hey, look, it's after school, it shouldn't matter, right? We're not causing any harm. And I happen to be wearing a t-shirt with some Japanese artwork of two sumo wrestlers that are sparring, right? For those of you who aren't as familiar with sumo wrestler garb, right? It basically looks like, there's not a lot of clothing. It's just basically what looks like a kind of like a diaper,
Mhm.
as they're wrestling. And one of them looks at my shirt, points it at it, and it gestures to the other. Can you believe he would wear something like this to school? And I said, what's the problem? It's an ancient Japanese tradition. And the other teacher goes, well, turn your Japanese tradition inside out. And then they both laugh and walk away. You know, I just, I just want to give students, like, what I dealt with, a voice, right, to say, hey, you know what, I don't want to feel helpless in situations like this, right?
Mhm.
But what am I going to do, right? These are teachers, they have all the leverage. Do I complain to the principal? Do I complain to, a parent who has like a head of PTA so that moments like this don't happen again? I think, yeah, that's another reason I'm inspired to do this kind of work, is just to say, hey, um, let's make sure things like this don't have to happen anymore.
I want to say great story, but it's a sad story. The good news is it's inspired you to do what you're doing. So
Yeah.
keep doing it, Jeff. I appreciate the time. I enjoyed the conversation, and I apologize for the snafu before we started recording.
Hey, it's okay, Dave. Like, when we still got the chance to have a great conversation, and look forward to seeing what people have to say about it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you too. See you around.